So hello, welcome everyone to Lauttasaari Manor, the premises of Kone Foundation. My name is Kalle Korhonen. I'm Director of Funding at Kone Foundation. Let's see. I'm sorry for my voice, which is a bit sort of down. I seem to have every year a flu cycle in August because I don't remember to put my clothes back on after the summer. But anyway, so we'll have an info session with myself and then Silja Pasila and Maija Karasvaara here, and then Reetta Sassi will be answering questions at the online. I mean, and then yeah. Anyway, here's the program. Some general words first, and then Maija and Silja present more detail, and then we'll have a break at 10:50, and then a Q&A session after that. And you can also ask us if you have sort of questions that are more sort of related to your individual situation. Please ask them from us directly, and it's not necessary to address them to the general audience. So, some words about Kone Foundation's mission, values, and focal points. The mission of Kone Foundation is to make the world a better place by creating conditions for free and multi-voiced art and research. So Kone Foundation is a grant maker. It's a private grant maker. It's not receiving money from governments. Its income is based on its assets, which are in different companies, mostly in a corporation called Kone, but there are many other assets too. So this is a private grant maker, and this is our mission. So we are not sort of an official agency or government agency. Our strategy has several sort of central points, and the most central one is academic and artistic freedom. We support academic and artistic freedom. So please remember this when you submit your applications. We are not requiring that you sort of try to make your work as compatible with Kone Foundation as possible. Then we have other values too, which are eco-social awareness. These are, of course, based on Finnish terms. Eco-social awareness is, in Finnish, it's ekososiaalinen sivistys. And sivistys, as you may know, is a very hard term to translate into English, but in German it's Bildung. So then we have diversity, boldness, perseverance, or resilience, or something like that. Long-term thinking, which this is what it is, and then sense of community. We have been able to increase our funding in recent years, and last year in 2024 we paid out 977 full we work year equivalent grants. So the amount of people who received funding from us last year was more than 1,000, around 1,500, I guess, or so. And anyway, we don't fund all research. All research. We are sort of excluding some fields, but I'll first tell you which fields we are not excluding, fields we are including. So we support research in the humanities, in social sciences, in environmental sciences. And then we support artistic research. And then in art, we are not sort of excluding any field. We support artistic work in all fields of art. But in research, in science, we do not fund research in medicine. For example, we rarely fund research in science or natural science. For example, chemistry, mathematics, physics, and so on, unless there's a very strict, strong connection with the fields we are funding, so humanities, social sciences, environmental sciences. And we, like everyone, we try to promote multidisciplinary work in the fields of research and art, but we are not requiring you to be multidisciplinary individuals. And then there is a requirement that there should be a connection to Finland, and my colleagues will tell you a bit more about this. So, in our annual grant call, which we are talking about now, last year we awarded a total of around 45 million euros, most of which 60% went to research projects, then 24% to art projects, and 17% to projects that combine research and art. So at the moment, in this year's annual call, we are still very much focused on research funding, art funding, research and art funding, and so on. We are not funding sort of other civil society work, cultural work, unless it has a sort of connection with research and art. But this might change next year, but we'll come back to that next year. So, the grants, the number of grants awarded last year was, in the general call, was 343. And as you can see, art grants are more numerous than research project grants, which means that art grants are usually smaller than research project grants, and then we have a certain amount of research and art projects. Now, as a funder, most of our funding goes to research. It's about 3/4 of our whole budget, and 1/4 is for art. But then, since we have both research and art projects, it's not so easy to count the exact figures for this. And we value collaboration between artists and researchers. And what we do fund is free, pluralistic, and professional research and art. So if you are only starting to do art, and if you sort of plan to have art as a hobby, it's really difficult to, or impossible to be awarded funding from Kone Foundation. And in research, it's the same. I mean, we do not fund studies, MA studies. You must have at least, in most cases, you have someone who has a doctoral degree in a research project, but individual grants can be awarded to those who don't yet have a doctorate. So we fund postmaster or doctoral studies too, but we are not funding MA studies. And this evaluation thing, it's something that Maija will talk more about. So, and then, as I said, we are not funding all academic disciplines. We do fund humanities and social sciences, but some fields are excluded for sort of historical reasons. Business studies, as such, law, psychology, and theology. But if they are only focusing on those fields, not in combination with other fields that we do fund. Then we fund environmental sciences, which can be a lot of things, so which extends from, let's say, societal environmental studies to ecology. So from SSH or social sciences and humanities to sort of biological sciences. Artistic research is a combination of research and artistic practice. Then, if you do research on art without doing art yourself in that project, then that's counted as humanities in our case. Of course, the categories are always problematic, as you know, but then because we have an evaluation, we have to sort of categorize, and you have to categorize your applications in some ways. We do fund also popularization, so we are not just funding original new research, but also you can have Kone Foundation funding for distributing the knowledge you have made in your project to other people, to decision makers, for example, or to the general public. And you can combine research and popularization in the same project. So in art, we are not excluding any field, as I said. The emphasis is still on funding artistic work. It's not in applied art, where the aim would be something else than artistic outputs. And you don't have to motivate your artistic work by saying that it has a positive effect on human well-being, or that it generates profit, or for the Finnish state, for example, which is struggling with its economy. And then we do fund projects that genuinely combine art and research. I put the genuinely here because we especially appreciate sort of collaboration in equal terms between academics and artists. And some words about our annual sort of structure. In the general call, we award the majority of our funding, where you can do research of art in any topic, but always within the fields that I mentioned before. Then we also have in the woods or for the forest or on the side of the forest grant call, which this year will be evaluated at the same time as the general call. So the deadline is 15 September. And now I have one slide about that initiative. So we fund projects that cover forest-related topics in the For the Woods initiative, especially interdisciplinary project. And in this grant call, we can fund sort of also civil society initiatives, activism, journalism, but also research, art, and it has, and there but you can apply for a forest-related project in the Metsän puolella or for the woods call. So now I'm giving the word to Silja Pasila here.
Thank you, Kalle, and good morning on my behalf as well. My name is Silja, and I work as a grant specialist at Kone Foundation. Kalle just told you about for what Kone Foundation funding can be applied for, and I'm gonna tell a little bit more about the forms of funding. So, Kone Foundation funding can be applied for by individuals, working groups, and organizations. And if the applicant is an organization, it must have a Finnish business ID, so Y-tunnus. So in general, there always must be a connection to Finland. And in terms of working groups, for example, this can mean that one of the members of the working groups is based in Finland or is Finnish. Working groups and organizations also must have a so-called responsible person who submits the application and if funding is granted, submits the payment requests and takes care of reporting the project. Then about the duration of funding. Funding for the same project can be granted for a maximum of 4 years. So this means that you can apply for up to 4 years of funding at once. And if you have just completed, for example, a 2-year project, you can apply for an additional maximum of 2 years. And after that, you have to have a 1-year break at least. So in other words, Kone Foundation funding is not a permanent form of funding. We also have a minimum duration for funding. So individual applications shorter than 6 months are not funded. And for working groups, the minimum period of work is 1 month of grant-funded activity. And if in a working group the artistic work or research lasts less than 1 month, you should apply for a salary or a fee instead. For example, for a single performance or lecture. But yeah, in general, for artistic work and research, you should apply for personal grants, and you cannot apply for a salary, for example, a researcher. Then, if the project includes people who are doing non-artistic or non-research work, for example, research assistants or coordinator, you should apply for a salary for them. And in addition to working grants, we also provide funding for expenses, such as travel costs, materials, fees, salaries. And these should be applied for in the same application as the working grants. So put everything on the same application. Then one frequently asked question is how much one can apply for funding. And in arts we have a limit, which is 250,000 euros. So basically this means that if the total budget of the project exceeds that 250,000 euros, there must be other sources of funding as well, because Kone Foundation only covers this 250,000 euros. And of course this amount can be distributed over 1 to 4 years, depending on the project's duration. So basically you can apply for this sum for 2 years, and after 2 years another 250,000 euros for another 2 years. But then there comes this 4-year rule and you have to have a break in the funding. And research projects by working groups typically are from 200,000 euros to 500,000 euros. Then Maija Karasvaara will tell about the evaluation process of the applications.
Yes, Yes, so hi everyone. I'll continue with a very important part of the application process, and especially as we know that there's a lot of people attending this info session that haven't applied from Kone Foundation before, but also our evaluation process might change a bit annually, and that's why it's also good to go through the process, even though you have applied from the foundation before. And the processing is based on peer reviewing, and at the moment, or in the past couple of years, in the annual call we've had approximately 60 evaluators, professionals from the different fields of art and research that we support, who read and review the applications for us. So basically this means that the staff, we don't review the applications, and we're of course happy to help you with submitting and planning what you're applying for, and we'll help you with the application, but we don't review the applications. That's always good to remember if you want to pitch your project to us. Since the evaluators change annually, we do this selection every year, and the suggestions that we get, we have a long list of names that we can use, so that this group reviewing the applications would be as diverse as possible. Of course, there are some limitations. For example, since most of our applications are in Finnish, they must be able to read the Finnish applications. But in general, we also look into, for example, in arts, the diversity, meaning that the evaluators come from different fields and maybe have different backgrounds in terms of their artistic practice, also the stage of their career, that there would be people from different stages of their own artistic career, and then also we can look into, for example, that they would be from different parts of Finland and such. So this if we talk about the diversity of the reviewers, then these are the types of things that we try to take into account. And anyone can propose an evaluator to the foundation. You can do it on our website. So in this way we get suggestions from different sources, also from the board, in some cases the staff, and then the peer reviewers can also suggest names when they're finished with their work. And they work independently in our online system, where the applications are also sent, and there's typically one evaluator per application, and I'll tell a little bit more about, for example, multidisciplinary applications in the next slides. But this is we don't have panels. This is different from maybe some other funders, and the evaluators can make suggestions to the board, and then the board still makes the final decisions based on these proposals. And we don't publish the names of the evaluators. One of the main reasons is that there are still several, I can continue to the profiles, there are still several, in many cases, several people behind, several reviewers behind these fields. These are the profiles for research, and then arts, and for example, these around 30 evaluators are more than these fields here, as you can see. So this basically means that we, for example, in visual arts, which is our biggest field in terms of the amount of applications, there's usually around 7 7 reviewers reviewing the applications in visual arts. So we don't publish the names for because the possible critique that we get for our funding decisions, we want it to be directed to us and to the foundation and to the board and the foundation as an organization, and not to these individual artists who have read the applications. And one of the reasons is this, that you still couldn't know exactly who has reviewed your application if there are if the names would be published. But the evaluators can, or they're allowed to tell afterwards if they want that they have been reviewing the applications for us. And then how to choose this evaluator. This is one of the most common questions that we receive, especially with new applicants. And the fields that I just showed, one of them should be selected in the application form, and this field and this expert would be assessing the application. But as a general guideline, since we allow applicants to choose a maximum of 3 profiles, the first profile is the primary profile, and then if you have a multidisciplinary application, it's quite common that you can choose, for example, 2 or 3, and then these evaluators can have discussions in the online system anonymously about the applications if they wish, so they can ask questions, and then we can also, of course, help them to look into these multidisciplinary applications if they need help with them, since this is something like Kalle told that this is something that we really have as a focal point, and of course we try to take this into account in the reviewing process as well. And then if you wish for your application to be reviewed by more than one evaluator, you can also comment in the application form. How do you see this in your personal work? And usually if we get questions if someone asks for help in choosing this reviewer, usually it still comes down to that you know your project and your work the best, and how different fields are represented there. And for example, in arts, you can look into this from the perspective of your own personal background. If your background is in performing arts, then it might be a good idea to choose performing arts. But if the project that you are doing is multidisciplinary and you have a group where people come from different backgrounds in different fields of arts, then it might be a different, the best choice might be something different. So yeah, and then also larger art projects, this usually means over 150,000, usually have more than one reviewer. And then what the evaluator pays attention to. We also ask for feedback from our evaluators every year, so we try to talk to them a lot before the process and then afterwards, so we get a lot of good information on what they have been paying attention to. And the guidelines that we give them are something that we also really pay attention to, so they get the criteria that the foundation has, since they change every year, and they usually have some kind of background information about what Kone Foundation funds, but the guidelines that we give them are of course very crucial in this process, so they know what they have to be looking for and what kind of criteria we have, and as a funder, and then the guidelines include these, and we discuss the criteria, and of course if they would suggest us something that the foundation doesn't support, then we can look into these things. But in general, most of our applications match our criteria, and then the guidelines that we give the evaluators include discussions, for example, on our focal points and what Kalle was telling us about previously, and how these, for example, these values should be taken into account. And academic and artistic freedom was already mentioned, but for example, the multi-year grants that we emphasize usually means that if you're planning to do a multi-year project, please apply for the whole amount of funding at once. This could mean, for example, a PhD application. If you haven't started your work yet, you can definitely apply for the whole 4 years. Or if you're planning to do your artistic work for several years, and then you have to include a work plan for the upcoming years. And it is possible for, especially in art, to apply for example, 4 years and then receive only 3 if it's not possible to fund the whole period. So it's still advised to apply for multi-year grants, and this is still an option that you might be funded less in some cases. Then crossing borders and environmental sustainability are also something that we focus on, and the crossing borders means crossing the borders of disciplinaries or fields that has been already mentioned a few times, but it can also mean crossing the borders of countries. We found a lot of Finnish researchers working abroad, and also groups that can have people working in different countries if they have a connection to Finland. And environmental sustainability is we don't have strict criteria what the project should do or shouldn't do, but for example, a very concrete example could be that domestic flights in Finland probably wouldn't be supported. And then if you're planning to apply for traveling, for example, a trip somewhere in Europe, you could apply for slow traveling and include more expenses if it's a more environmentally sustainable way for traveling. So this is encouraged, even though it would take more money to do so. And you can find detailed guidelines on attachments from our website, and what we guide that they should include, for example, a CV. Of course, in arts and research are very different, but the formal requirements is something that we usually don't pay that much attention to. This means that, for example, a CV can be a PDF file, or in arts it's becoming more and more common that it's a link to the artist website that has the CV included, as long as it's accessible to the reviewer who's assessing the application. And the same with other attachments, especially in arts, that might include some links to sites or services that might include some kind of login. This is something that we hope that the applications wouldn't include, so that it's safe and easy for the reviewers to open the attachment. And the CVs are required from everyone who have some kind of role in the project, working either with a working grant or, like Silja mentioned, that of course there can be, for example, a coordinator. If there's a salary involved, then the application should also include a CV from this person. But if, for example, you can hire a research assistant afterwards if you are funded with the grant, and you of course in this case wouldn't have to include the CV from this person. And a portfolio is necessary if you're applying for artistic work, an artistic working grant for someone, either an individual or a group. And if you haven't been working together as a group before, you can have individual portfolios. But in some cases, if you have previous work, this can be either or a combination. And the same rule in terms of the formal requirements is the same guideline for the portfolios, that it doesn't have to be a PDF file with pictures, or it can also be a link to a website or a performance link or something that you think is valuable for the evaluator, so they get the idea of what type of work you have been doing in the field of art. And the portfolio is of course required only for artistic projects and not research. Then a few things on what the evaluator usually pays attention to, and it's kind of a reminder of how this process works. And since the evaluator is a peer and doesn't necessarily know your previous work, it's good to remember that even though you're sending the application to the foundation, the evaluator is only only the new application is available, and then for example previous applications cannot be referred to, or if you have received funding from Kone Foundation previously, the reports are not visible. And the summary is important also because like is mentioned here, the evaluator might have many applications, and it's good to be clear and bring forth in the summary what you're planning to do. But it's also published on our website, as you probably know if you have read our previous projects, about our previous projects. So when you write it, it's good to remember that it might be published if you are awarded with the grant. And these reoccurring mistakes or common misconceptions are that in some cases, since the reviewer is a peer, and if there's an application that has a lot of things listed in the work plan, and then the funding period is only a very short time, for example, a 6-month project for an individual, which is our minimum, that it's quite clear that it's not a realistic application, even though the applicant might think that if I do things really efficiently and very quickly, then it's easier to get funding since this would take less money. But that's not what we're looking for. And the other option might be that the application is a multi-year application, but the work plan is very vague, and this really means like a half-page work plan for a 4-year grant. So I really encourage that even though you would be maybe emphasizing your previous projects and you have good portfolios and the evaluator can see what you have worked with and maybe can see the professional value of your work from your portfolio, it's still good to keep in mind that it would be a big commitment from the foundation to start supporting your work for the next 4 years. So take this into account. But of course there are plans that might change, and you shouldn't worry too much that you don't know everything that will happen in year 2 or 3 or 4. But you can also write if there's something that you might be doing or you're working towards to, especially in arts where the if your artistic practice is not so project-based, that's something that funders are usually receiving a lot of critique for, that everything is really project-based, and you can just tell in the work plan what are the themes and what types of things you're planning to work with, and tell about your practice. And then the same with, for example, in research applications, if you're applying for your PhD and you don't know where you will be traveling to for a seminar in the third or fourth year, you can still apply for the funding, and please do so, since it's possible to receive it with the one application, and you can just state that you will be doing a trip to Europe for example, a seminar that you don't know yet the details for. And also, if you are funded with a Kone Foundation grant, you can. We work with our grantees a lot with changes in the project, so you can also do like an official application for this in case there's something changing. So when you're still in the application stage, you still shouldn't worry too much about this, since it is a plan. And then one thing that the evaluators have mentioned is that sometimes the application itself stresses a lot the previous work that you have done, and it doesn't include a clear plan for what you're now applying for. And long-term projects, especially in arts, sometimes have already received funding from somewhere. There might be pending applications when you're applying. There are other foundations opening applications called maybe a bit before us or later this fall. So you can list these also in the application, and then please let us know if you have received funding from elsewhere. This applies to all applicants, and also to paid positions in universities, since we get information from other funders, but in some cases we haven't received the information, and then we don't have like a waiting list that if you notify us after the funding decisions, then the next person in line could have benefited from the funding, and it's not available anymore. So this is really out of solidarity as well. It's really important to let us know. And the long-term projects can, like Silja mentioned, can have different sources for funding, and we try to also look into sustainable funding in art projects, so that, for example, organizations wouldn't become totally depending on Kone Foundation, but it's also fine to apply for a project with only Kone Foundation funding if it's not like permanent work that you would be depending on the funding for many years. So if it's more of a project, then it's fine to only have funding from us. And Silja will continue with choices to make in your application.
I'm gonna go through some choices to make in the application, and actually Maija explained quite clearly the selecting the evaluator, so I'm not gonna go into that, but it is a very important choice on the application, so please pay attention into that. But yeah, I'm gonna open a little bit about the type of the project, purpose of funding, and personal grant levels. And these selections, they do not affect the evaluation as such, so don't worry if you choose a wrong category, because we at the foundation office will correct them then. Yeah, so the type of the project, this refers to which field does the project belong to. And first there is research and art, which are probably quite clear. Then there is research and art projects, and that category is for projects that are combining research and art. And if you select that option, you will also be asked how these two are combined in your project. So for example, this can be collaborations between researchers and artists, or then academic artistic research projects, for example. Then we also have other cultural work, which is really rarely funded, as Kalle already told. So most of our funding goes to researchers and artists. But we also fund some projects every year in this category. And this other cultural work may include, for example, museum projects or cultural heritage projects. But of course, they must still meet the Kone Foundation focuses. Then we have purpose of funding. Yeah, so as said earlier, we mostly fund artists and researchers' work. So that is the first category. Then PhD work is separated from other research work. So if you are applying for a doctoral thesis, please select the second category. And then, well, postdoctoral researchers, for example, should pick up the first option. We don't have a separate category for them. It's considered as research. Then we have popularization of research, and it can include books or events, for example. And then we also fund some more like limited applications, for example, organizing an event in a field supported by the foundation. But as a reminder, I would say that if you are applying for your own artistic work, that should be listed as the primary purpose, even if the work includes organizing exhibitions or events, for example. Then personal working grants. Personal working grants are paid monthly directly from the foundation to the grantee's bank account. Either as full-time grants or part-time grants, and part-time grants are 25%, 50%, or 75%. And it's also possible to change the percentage after the award if you need to do some changes then. And when you are applying for these personal grants, you have to select the level of the grant. And in arts, this level 1 refers to under 10 years of professional experience as an artist. And level 2 is if you have over 10 years professional artistic work behind. And then level 3 is over 20 years of artistic professional work. And if you are applying these levels of 2 or 3, you also must explain that in the application, and in that you can refer to your CV, because you have to add that as an attachment in the application. In research, these levels are maybe a little bit more straightforward. So level 1 is for PhD researchers, then level 2 is for postdocs, and level 3 is for experienced researchers, docentes in Finnish academic system. Anyways, you have to have like several academic publications. And also in research applications, you have to explain the levels 2 and 3 if you are applying for those. Yes. Okay. Then we have some summary. Oops. Nope. Some reminders here on this slide. Please remember to list all the project expenses for the full duration of the work in your application when you are doing your application. And also, as I said earlier, this must be applied for in the same application. And don't forget to add, for example, travel expenses. Regarding the references or recommendations, they are mandatory for PhD applicants and recommended for early stage postdocs. And in arts, recommendations are not mandatory, but they can be useful in some cases. For example, if you have a larger project that is seeking a broader impact in the field of art. In recommendations, quality matters more than quantity, and likewise, quality is more important than the status of the person who gives the recommendation. So it's really essential that the person who gives the recommendation really knows your work and can tell something about it. Because the foundation emphasizes long-term work, so if it's possible, apply for a multi-year grant for a multi-year project. And of course, then a multi-year work plan is also required. So you must have at least some sort of a plan for the coming years as well. Then the language you use in the application, it doesn't affect the evaluation. The application can be submitted in Finnish, Swedish, or English. And as a note, there are sometimes preconceptions about applying for Kone Foundation funding. So if you face any kind of guidelines that are not mentioned in our official instructions, please ask us, because we don't have any kind of secret rules. And an important thing is that the application period closes on September 15th at 4 p.m. sharp. So be in time, because we don't accept late applications, even if they are only 1 minute or 1 second late. Then, as a final encouragement, we receive around 6,000 applications every year. And many of them are excellent applications, and unfortunately not every application gets the funding. So if your application is not successful this year, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad application. So we encourage you to apply again next year. But then on the other hand, well, for example, last year about 350 projects were funded, and that means that there were many times more of individuals who received grants, so many people also get a grant. Unfortunately, we cannot provide feedback on individual applications due to the large number of applications. But after publishing grants, we try to share some general feedback in our communications channel, highlighting evaluators' general comments on the applications. Then, if you have questions for us, or where can you find help, we have our guidelines, instructions for making an application on our website. And those instructions almost cover everything. But if you can't find an answer there, we have a personal grant advice session in September. And actually, I just heard that these are already fully booked, but we are trying to organize some extra sessions. So you can find more information on them on our website and also book a time there. And we also provide advice by email through our grant service. There is a message section there where you can send us a message, and by phone, and also during the application period we have a chat where you can ask like quick questions. Yes, but we wish you good luck with your application, and now we will have a 10-minute break, and after that we will have time for questions. So thank you.
So we agreed with Maija that I will first answer some questions that came online. So my questions are, the first one, does sustainability apply to research practices or to the content as well? If the application argues, say, in favor of coal mining, can it be ever funded? Well, it does apply to research practices and to the content, but I mean, if you have but then it all depends on the evaluation. So if you have a project in which you sort of try to prove that coal mining is necessary to prevent the overheating, the warming of the environment, then it would be evaluated, I guess. And then the other question, as I understand it, the link must be with Finland itself through the team, residence or location, rather than the project alone, right? Yeah, well, I mean, if you have a project or group working somewhere else, no one has any connection with Finland, and you say that you are working on a theme related to Finland, I think it's still quite difficult to receive funding from Kone Foundation, because in that case you would not have the best possibilities to work on that theme. Because if you don't have any connections with Finland, then I don't see why, how you could work on Finland-related themes without any connections with Finland. So that's sort of, the things are sort of, there's involvement of different things. I don't know if you understand this, but well, unfortunately, we are not a truly global funder, so we could fund any research done anywhere on any topic.
And maybe I could add that if you're planning to come to Finland to do your work, and that is good enough a connection if you have, for example, if you're starting your doctoral studies at, for example, Aalto University, and at the moment you live in another country and you're not a Finn, then that's of course fine, since you would then have a recommendation from your supervisor, and then you can come in and still work, or you would have in this case a connection. I had two questions also from YouTube that I'm going to answer first, or maybe Kalle can also answer the first one. That is, do technical development projects with a link to art/music have a chance as environmental science projects?
Yeah, because I was thinking about what do you mean by a technical development project with a link to arts music? So
this, I would say,
well, it's not environmental science, certainly not.
But this, sounds like it's not environmental science, but in general, technical development projects, if you're doing an individual project, or you have a group or an organization that is not from the field of art, in this case, I wouldn't say yes or no. It would depend a bit on what your connection, or what this link to art and music or the field would be. But if it's more like a technical, like really a technical development projects, and you're not working in the field of art, then it could be that Kone Foundation is not the right funder for you, especially if it's like if you would be planning to start some kind of business or service that would maybe be directed to the professionals in the art field. That's one option. That it might be that you couldn't apply for the funding in arts. And then there's another question. As you mentioned, applied art projects do not usually get funded. Could you please provide examples of which projects would classify as applied art? This is, of course, a very broad question, but I think what we we emphasize in our guidelines is that when you're writing the work plan, you don't have to tell us or try to convince us that this art that you're planning to make would have some kind of influence on something other than just that it is art, and it's what your plan is depending on, of course, on the field where you're coming from, or are you working alone or such. So it basically means that you don't have to tell us about what types of effects it will have. Of course, we don't think that the well-being that people will get from experience in art or as such, it's of course a good thing and a positive thing, but it's not something that we look into as a funder, and you don't have to tell us that you will have this as the goal of your project. That's what it usually means, but of course applied art can mean different things. And one thing that could be a good thing to mention is that you can have art projects for different types of audiences, different sizes, for example. That we're not looking for projects that are as big as possible and for huge audiences. We annually fund projects that are for more marginal audiences, and that's of course fine. And then there can be some other projects that are aimed towards a wider audience or more specific audience, for example. But this is not a question that we have as a criteria, although some other funders might have it. All right. So maybe we can then move to questions from...
Yes.
And then please use the microphone so everyone on YouTube can also hear you.
I have actually a follow-up question to the applied art question, because I don't think you answered it. And I have a kind of a similar question about if you could comment where you draw the line between applied art and visual art. So what do you define as applied art? So as far as I understood from the presentation, the most important thing is like the artistic practice and that the function or like the reason is the artistic work. But so if it's, does it mean that it disqualifies any kind of art which produces like objects? Or do you mean that if it's purely like just like functional object or like design, even if it's like crafted design, it's kind of disqualified? Or so maybe you could still unwrap a little bit the borders between...
Well, if it's a product, if you are applying for product development, then it's more difficult to receive funding from Kone Foundation. But of course, many art projects produce objects, artifacts.
In a way, the sculpture is also a product. Like, today, like the borders, like quite vague. Or you mean that if it's like a product which is possibly like multiplied like endlessly?
Yeah, I guess one way of looking into this could be that if you're applying for a project that is for, I'm trying to give like concrete examples because this is a question that might be a bit difficult to answer. Very like if you have like a specific question regarding your own projects, of course you can discuss that after this info. But we receive applications that have, for example, someone working professionally in the field of art, so fitting our criteria, they could apply. But the project that they're planning to do is very much aimed towards, for example, building a business model for like a design company, this type of work. Even though there are artistic processes involved, then that would still not be, if that's the way you're presenting the project and not what you're planning to do as such, and art as such. I think that's one thing. And then we don't have an evaluator design, and that's. But then we have funded projects that have, for example, come from the field of fashion design. If there are elements that are very much focusing on the artistic value, and then maybe the focal points that we have in our guidelines, and they match, then it's possible to get funding. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I guess the applied side, which was also in the slides, could mean that in some cases it could mean like a project that's aimed towards it's more like for a certain group of people, and the audience is then determining what you're planning to do. And then there are other funders for these types of, for example, health and social issues that might be determining what you're doing. And then, of course, in some cases, the question is also that they're not professional artists doing the work. That's one criteria that sometimes is the reason why we wouldn't be funding, since in some applications it's someone not coming from the field of art, but they're taking art as kind of like a way of promoting something else. I guess that's one like very very general examples of what it could mean, and not art as such and professional artistic work as such, which are something that we emphasize.
Yeah, who's first? There's one.
I just want to ask, like, if like artistic installation is also considered like applied art, if it's something
It's
in between.
artistic work.
Okay, so if it's something between like art and architecture, this kind of thing, installation is considered art. Okay.
If you're a professional artist doing the work, yeah, then you can apply.
I have a couple of questions about these exceptional other cultural projects that might get funded. Is there a portion of the budget that's allocated to those every year? Or is it that you get a few exceptional applications, and if they're really exceptional, they'll get funded?
Yeah, that would be the latter one, meaning that usually they are projects in the evaluation for in art. They involve, for example, cultural heritage or museum work that is not connected to art museums, because in that case it would be possible to categorize it as an art project. This is one, and if it's a cultural heritage project that has a connection to the focal points of the foundation, then it could be funded. And then in some cases they have been journalistic projects that have a very strong connection to the focal points, but they're journalists working and then not professional artists, for example. So it gives kind of like the option to apply for these types of projects, and we have an evaluator for museum work and cultural heritage. But of course, museum work can be also in the field of art if it's for example, art museums. So they overlap. Yeah, but yeah, these are some examples that are possible, and yeah, we don't have a set budget. We always look. In general, we have only the amounts that are awarded in the different fields depend on how many applications we receive. But we usually receive quite the same for each field, and that's why, for example, visual art has been the biggest. And then there are some fields in arts that have been growing in the past couple of years in terms of amount of applications, and then that means that they have received more funding. Yeah.
I'd like to ask about the popularization of science. So What do you expect to see when funding for that is applied for, and how should it be combined with the actual research work? Are there some best practices or do's and don'ts? And also, another question, if you are applying for a docentship and your application is already in, do you kind of put yourself as the category 3 already at that point? Is it unproblematic?
Yes, for the last question, we are not even requiring that you have the university chancellor issued docentship certificate. We count your publications in addition to the thesis, to the doctoral work, and there you can apply for a third grade grant. And to the first question, you don't have to have, as I said, you don't have to have research in every project. You can have a project which is only focused on popularization, and there you can have all the options you can think of in popularizing. But of course, in popularizing, you should indicate which audiences you plan to popularize and how, in which ways. So basically, it has often been that people have applied for a non-fiction book. Yeah, that can be funded, but there are so many other options too you can think of.
Hello. In the typology of grant for exhibition or event, one can apply only for production expenses without any personal grants, or it varies. If it's an individual applying for that, then a portion should always be dedicated to that person's grant. And then if it's an organization registered in Finland, then it can apply only for production grants. Are there variations, or how is it considered?
Yeah, there are variations. An organization can apply for expenses and include personal grants in the application as well, if the project that the organization is executing would involve individual artists. So one application could include, for example, funding for the expenses of the project, and the applicant would be the organization, and then there could be salaries for some people, and then, for example, if there's an artist working for a longer period, for this, in this case, it would mean that 1 month at least in their personal artistic practice, because of course the artist can do different things in the project. If the artist is more like a producer and not an artistic producer, then of course artists can also receive salaries if the work they're doing is more other than artistic work. This is always a bit difficult to distinguish. And then same with working groups, that working groups can involve people. For example, if you look at the lists of previous grants, there might be groups that include artists working with their personal work or working together in creating art, and then there might be someone doing research, if it's a combination, and then there might be people who are receiving salaries from the project, if you just look at the list of names. And then there could also be someone listed who doesn't receive any funding, and there's a section in the application saying people who are part of the working group, but they wouldn't be receiving grants from the foundation. So this can be a combination of
for
many
events, exhibitions, and art production section, one can apply only expenses without any personal grant.
Well, we don't have a strict guidelines for that, but usually that is the case. Yeah, since if it involves your personal artistic work, then choose the first category.
Then the other question is, in the form, when one is asked to mention other grants and other funding, for me it has always been unclear if I must mention other funding, if it's related to the same project, or also other funding that has nothing to do with that project. For me, it's not super clear. And sometimes I put funding also if it's not related to because I'm not sure what that means.
And it is difficult also to give strict guidelines. But in general, I would say that if you're applying for, if you're thinking about the evaluation process and things that we and also the evaluator look into when we're reviewing the application. If it's unclear, especially if there's many people involved, there could be, for example, someone working, like, for example, they have like a multi-year grant from Taike, and they're involved in the project that is coming next year. And then it's good to include that so we know that, okay, this is not overlapping funding, for example, even though it wouldn't be for the same project. But then if it's an organization applying, I think it's important to, even of course the documents that you have to attach are a bit different, but it's good to know the overall funding status of the organization. And then if it's funding for a project, then as was mentioned earlier, it's we don't require other funding that you should have beforehand that you can apply for. But especially with bigger grants for organizations, the reviewers also look into, and we help them usually with that, to kind of see how this would maybe continue after this funding, if it's for the core operations of the organization. So it also depends on what you're applying for, and then it's usually good to, if you're uncertain, it's not a problem to add too much information. I think it's always just put everything there if you're unclear. Yeah.
Can I have something in relation to this?
Yeah, sure.
I was just wondering about this multi-year grant. If somebody has a Taike grant and they have an overlapping project, in the salaries it's quite clear. You have this 25%, 100%. But is it the same with those grants, so that you can have a grant? Should you be paid a salary from Kone as an artist, or is it possible to have a simultaneous some kind of grant payment?
Yeah, the 25, 50, and 75% were for grants specifically, and not for salaries. Of course, you can work part-time with something else, but you don't then have to.
For example, if you have a long-term grant from Taike and a project gets a grant from Kone, how is that?
Well, if you have a personal grant from Taike for the upcoming years, and then you would be applying for a personal grant, then we wouldn't award it since you already have funding from elsewhere or another foundation. But if it's a group, if it's for a group, in some cases we have looked into the total budget, and it's possible to apply for like a 25% compensation, so that people are not working, since our grant levels are higher than with Taike, but this is very, very rare that we have. But if this would happen, then we would contact you if it's not taken into account. Yeah, so people don't receive like 1,800 and 3,000 and so forth. So yeah, it's good to just include all this information in the application, so we can look into the total budget. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a question. There are two scientific research projects which I would like to apply for, and I'm the responsible person associated with the Finnish university for both of them. But each of the projects involves multiple universities from Finland and elsewhere, and also geographically, and different roles and different people. And I'm curious how I should apply. If it's a working group, then do I have to apply on behalf of my university, or university have to apply?
No, we always have. I mean, in principle, you could apply as a university, but we usually change those projects if we fund them to individual, because we award grants to individuals or organizations, not to universities. Okay. That's the way how we do it. So if you then receive the funding, then there is no problem in sort of paying the expense money to, let's say, 2 or even 3 different universities, in addition to the personal grants, which are paid directly to the grantees, as Silja told you.
Okay. Yeah, because it consists of my personal grants and then the expenses for all the other things. So I can apply as myself.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and when the grant is paid, we really quite often direct the money to different accounts. Could be several personal accounts if there's people working, and then 1 or 2 organizations that. Same with our arts projects, that there's usually an organization paying the salaries, and that's something that it's good to take into account if you're an individual or a working group applying for salaries, that there has to be someone taking care of the responsibilities like paying taxes and such.
So practically it's not the working group application which I should submit, but the personal with the...
It's a working group application where you are the leader.
Yeah,
if
but
you have
what kind of y-tunnus I need to put there?
No.
In that case, you don't
really
have to put on it. You don't have
no.
Okay.
If you're an individual researcher, you can apply for funding that would be paid direct or paid to the university, for example, or in working groups. It's, I guess, even more common that you can have people from, in some cases, different organizations, and then you can direct the payment requests to.
Okay.
And
the organization.
I must add that it's becoming more and more difficult to get the travel expense money through to the people who have to travel. So in that case, we can think about paying the travel expense money directly to the responsible person in the project, because the universities, because of new taxation rules, have trouble in paying them out. Or you must pay taxes even for your ticket or your hotel accommodation.
I would just quickly say on this topic, because you mentioned that we don't pay universities, but if you are applying as an individual, then the payment will be made to your university if you are affiliated to a university.
No, we pay the personal grant to you, and then
Directly.
the expense money, if it's like DNA analysis or some bigger funds that you need for your research, or research assistant salaries, that money goes to the university.
But in some projects there are no, there is no funding direct going to the university, so it's we don't have set rules. It's usually something that can also be looked into after the grant has been awarded, and in the application you don't have to state that this will be paid to the university, for example, and in some cases you might change the university after the grant has been awarded. Some kind of change happens, but in general the personal grant is always paid directly to the person, even though they would be outside of Finland, or there's no exception in that, and also that we don't pay salaries to people who are doing research and art, and that's another rule. But in terms of these expenses and how they are paid, there are some differences with different universities, different projects, how it's what's the best way to do it, basically. And in some cases, like Kalle mentioned, the universities might, for example, say that they're not able to pay the travel expenses to the members of a working group for some reason, for these bureaucracy reasons, and then we of course try to be flexible so that the grantee gets to do the project without, for example, losing some of the expenses to the university or such. Yeah. So we try to be flexible. I think that's the that's the guideline here. If there are some problems.
Did you have a...
Yeah. I got the mic. I would like to build on the first question that was asked. So sorry for going back to that. But I am wondering, because of course when we talk about applied arts and maybe design, and there is not like a jury or an evaluator for design, for example. However, how would it be considered if like there are design practitioners that have been doing art together, or more like communal art together, and are applying to continue that like art initiative, so that it becomes something more sustainable in the future as well, despite us not being, like our CVs wouldn't reflect a professional artist per se, since we have like other day jobs, but we have been doing art for years together, for example. How would that be then considered?
Yeah. Well, of course, there are always exceptions in terms of what people do and what they might be able to do. And I think a quick answer to this would be that we discuss these types of things and these exceptions and what take into account with our evaluators, so that the evaluators don't have the idea that they would have to be looking for a visual art project that have some kind of criteria, or performing arts projects that have some kind of criteria that we state, for example, that this is visual arts and nothing else is. But the professional, who is a professional in arts, that's something that, of course, they also evaluate. And your CV, because this depends a lot on what field you're working in. And, for example, in literature, there's no like a certain background if you end up writing novels, and usually in that case it means that you have to have something published before you can receive the first grant, or at least a longer grant. So then it's your portfolio that's looked into more. But then if you have just graduated from an art university, for example, in Helsinki or somewhere else, then that counts as you are a professional artist, even though your portfolio and CV might not be as long, since there is education, of course. That's one path. And then, of course, there can be self-taught artists in the field that are considered professional, but that process is up to the evaluator, of course, and do they see your work as professional artistic work? And it still has some kind of criteria, and it doesn't mean that anyone can become an artist and start doing art because they want to. And that's what we try to distinguish. And like Kalle said, that we still receive some applications that are for people who would like to become artists, and that's of course fine, but maybe not. It's not possible to receive a grant in that stage of your career. Yeah.
Thank you. My question is relevant to the questions over there regarding the paid expenses to the university. So my question is, does these paid expenses can cover also tuition fee in case the PhD research is hosted by the foreign university, but the research itself is conducted in Finland?
Sorry, which fee?
It's more
does
like
it cover what?
Multidisciplinary kind of research that combines social sciences and a little bit of science.
Yeah, but what fee did you ask about? I didn't hear the word. Tuition. Yes. Tuition fee can be covered, yes.
Any more questions?
About the part-time grant, so when you mention like 25, 50, 75%, does it also mean that you kind of receive 25% of that, what was mentioned before, like as a salary, like 2,700? So if you mention that the grant is 25%, does it mean that you get 25% of
that amount? Yeah. Okay. As a grant, not as a salary. Yeah.
So it's not like that you just like work for a longer time. Like for example, like if you have a job, and then you are able to work like 50 or 25% on the grant, that you would just take like a year instead of 6 months, or it just means exactly that you just receive 25% of the monthly like artist salary.
Yeah, the grant can be for full-time work. That's the, I guess, the most common situation. But the part-time grant the reason for that can be, there can be different reasons why you want to apply for a part-time grant. And then in that case, yes, it would mean that if you're applying for a full-time grant, it's that monthly amount for example, a year or 2 years or 3 years, and we pay monthly. And then if you would apply for a 50% grant, of course, the total amount of money is half, and then you would have to write the application so that you have enough time to execute the project. So if your situation is that you have a part-time job, or you're working in another field, or whatever you're doing, which is the reason why you couldn't be working full-time with your project, you can apply for example, a 50% grant for 2 years. But there can also be variations for different reasons. For example, in the application form, you can only have 1% per year. But after you have been awarded with a grant, it's quite common that, for example, in the 3rd year, you would start working with another project. And then you would tell us that you want the rest of the grant to be paid for part-time work, for example. So this can change. But the amount of money is always the same. 100% is this much. And then if it's paid in smaller installments, then it, of course, would be paid in a longer period of time.
Do you have a criteria for like working hours? Let's say saying that if you're working full working day, you cannot apply possibly for a full-time grant or any kind of like...
We sort of discourage you from applying. If you have a job and if you don't plan to have a leave, if you have a 100% job, we discourage you from applying for a Kone Foundation grant, because it's not likely that you will be awarded a grant, because it's not considered feasible. It's not considered that you will be able to do the
200%.
Yeah, 200% or 150%. I mean, this is not about any person personally, but it's just about and also about justice in awarding grants. If people who have full-time jobs receive more funding, even additional funding from Kone Foundation, it doesn't seem very just.
But of course, it's quite often the case that since it's not certain that you will get the funding, you might have a permanent, like a 100% work full-time job at the moment, and then you would be applying for the grant, and then you can, for example, write in the application that if you are awarded with the grant and you're pursuing your professional artistic work in the upcoming years, then you will be able to do it either combining the two and how you will be doing it. So it becomes a realistic plan. I think that's one of the reasons. And of course, as a funder, we don't want to end up in a situation that we have funded people who are actually doing something completely different. Since, especially with research and art, it's very rare that you can have a full-time job and then still do full-time artistic work as kind of like as a side project. And in that sense, we might end up in the situation where you report to us that, yes, I was paid the funding for 2 years, but I didn't have the time and energy to do the projects. And of course, that's something that we also want to discourage. But of course, these situations can be very, very diverse. And we couldn't tell anyone that if you want to apply for funding, you should leave your job first, which is, of course, not a good thing.
Sorry, I'd like to move to another question now.
But we can continue with this if it's something that you want to ask.
There's a question by Shahbakti Rostami, if I pronounce it correctly. We are a group of researchers from another country, but our research topic is related to Finland. Also, we haven't been able to make any Finnish citizen as part of our team. So you don't need a Finnish citizen. But if you have a research topic which is related to Finland, you should at least explain what is your knowledge about that topic in the Finnish context, how you can access it without any sort of affiliations or contact people in Finland or so. I'm not saying that you must always have someone based in Finland in order to do research on Finland, but it's a lot easier that way. But maybe you should ask us in more detail by email or.
Yeah, because it's quite rare that you have a strong connection to Finland if you don't have any affiliation or what Kalle mentioned. Yeah.
A question related to Sami lands. One of the projects I'm leading is with Sami lands, and part is in Finland, Inari, and the other part is in Kautokeino, Norway. Can I apply from Kone Foundation only the part which is connected entirely to Finnish part, or can it be the entire funding or part of the funding?
No, I mean, you can do research on any country. You can do research on any country, but if you already, I mean, you are affiliated with the Finnish research organization, so you can do research on St. Lucia, the Bahamas, Eswatini, any country you can. You don't have to do research on Finland exclusively.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Regarding funding for organization, so for organization to start, and we are new to funding, for example, or funding's this big, but we have gotten fundings before. Is it like somehow worth mentioning in our application that the same project has been funded before by someone else? That is my first question. And my second question is that since we are we're about 4 members that will apply for the organization, and of course it's very scary to see how the amount of money goes up because of the personal working grants and stuff. And we have speculated about how probable it is to get a higher amount of money because we're more people, even though the project will not last, for example, 4 years, but would last, for example, 2 years. And if Kone would ever speculate to award less money than applied, if they seem suitable or not, or if it's like a very rare exception to do. So that is our.
Yeah, it is possible to receive less funding than what you have applied for, and we haven't had this upper limit for art projects, this 250,000 in our guidelines before, but we wanted to put it there now since we haven't awarded grants that have been higher than 250 in the past. I don't know how many years, since it's always it's something. Or there are many reasons for this, but I think one thing is that it's as a funder we want to be clear that there are no kind of that, for example, with a four-year project that could benefit from a 2-year funding or 3-year funding. In that case, it could be possible that you would just receive, for example, half of what you apply for. But we tried not to kind of cut a little bit from everyone to be able to fund more, because of course, as was mentioned, the reviewers always want to suggest more than what we fund, even though the amounts of money are quite big. it's still distributed to a lot of projects. And in arts, it could mean that an individual artist receives less, but we try not to be too kind of, how to say, like, we really try to make it clear why we have, for example, cut some parts, or in some cases we are in contact with the applicants if this is the case, and the evaluator is suggesting a lot less than what you have funded, what you have applied for. And what was the first question?
The first question was about oh yeah, previous grants have been awarded.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's good to mention them, and there's no reason not to. Yeah, yeah, and you can also just, if you have a project that has already received funding from someone, or you have already done, or you have already been working with the project for, well, let's say 2 years, and now you're applying for more, like it's kind of like a continuation of the project. You can also describe this in the work plan, how things have been going. Yeah. Any more questions? We have a few minutes. One here.
I'll ask a different question about then the budget planning and saying how much, like, how are you planning to fund your project? And so is it, if the situation is so, if you don't get any funding, the project is just like not happening, is it kind of a normal situation for you or not? Or like, can it be like, talking about artistic work and artistic projects fully funded by Kone Foundation? Or do you prefer that, you know, if you're like applying for several, like, which is quite common, yeah, that any grant you can get, you will use it. Is it like normal situation or for you, or like in case if you're applying for several grants that you have to say like 50% from Taike, like 50% from Kone, or then like saying because anyway it's either Kone or Taike. Like how to like
well,
kind of.
Yeah, if I understood the question correctly, it's common, for example, or especially for bigger projects, to have several funders, and we don't look into. In the evaluation process, we don't only look into the total budget, but it's a very crucial information in terms of if you have, for example, pending applications. Of course, I think it's good. It might be something that the evaluator looks into, that this group has, or for example, this working group has applied from several sources and they have received some funding, and how the total budget would be built. But we don't require funding from elsewhere, like some funders, that you have to have like 30% of your budget covered before you can apply from Kone Foundation. Yeah.
But do you need, like, in a way that the budget is that I for sure can handle it myself on my funds, or can I really like rely on like the funding from Kone Foundation? Like? Yeah, well, yeah. As an answer to that, any projects can rely to the Kone Foundation funding for longer projects. Yeah, that's of course good. Since I mean we don't fund very small grants, like let's say a couple of €1,000, but it's common that the projects have received these smaller grants or some other funding, and as long as they don't overlap, and it's a realistic budget, and the bigger the project gets, then we usually look into more detail, like how will this be executed? Yeah.
Question is on the budget to be very concrete. You know, for example, I have to go to Indonesia.
Please wait for the
microphone. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Denis Rescap. Just very concrete for the budget. You know, you have to go to Indonesia. You stay 1 month. You come back. There are two costs. First, of course, the flight ticket. Let's say 2,000. That maybe I'm the one who will tell how much it is, or it's just you have a standard setup, and then when you are there, you need to sleep, to take, to go to some hotel, then you have a standard, for example, 100 euros a day, I don't know, or do we need to create that? And of course, after I need a computer, do I need to buy this computer? And then you can put it in the expenses. How much then you will think that is a normal computer for next 3-4 years? Is it maybe 2,000 euros? Then very concrete, do you have some benchmark, or do we simply organize this budget?
Yeah, we don't have guidelines for the amount, and you do the estimates yourself. Yeah. And of course, we look into that, like they're realistic, but yeah, you don't have to have very, very set amounts, for example, for flights, since they vary as long as you apply for enough funding that you don't end up in the situation that you can afford to buy the flights with the. So there are estimates, yeah.
So I will soon have to stop, but I mean we will be available for some time here for individual questions, and I'd like to remind those of you who are new to the Finnish system of private funders, private grant makers, which is quite different from many other countries, that there are so many other funders who do also fund research and art, and which where the funding period is before you get the Kone Foundation response. So, for example, the Finnish Cultural Foundation and the Kordelin is already closed, but anyway, there are there's more information about that you can find on the Finnish Association of Foundations website, for example.
Okay. Yeah. I guess we're finished with the Q&A, and then please contact us directly or through these channels that were mentioned earlier if you have any questions. And we try to find times in our calendars to open more of these individual grant advice sessions, since we heard that they're already booked, even though we advertised them today. So we try to look for more. And they're especially good if you're a working group and you want to have a Zoom talk where everyone's there, but then if you're an individual applying and you have some general questions, you can of course just call us and you don't have to book the Zoom. We try to call back if we're busy. Okay, thanks.
Thanks.